Want an easy way to see if you could save money on car insurance? Geico gives you 3. Call 1-800-947-AUTO. Go online to geico.com or stop by the Geico office nearest you. 3 ways you could save 15% or more.
Welcome to the Right Time Podcast. The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. You're listening to The Right Time with Bomani Jones. The phone number to hang out with us, 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. And we're going to get straight to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contract. Mike, the NBA punishment process is just an absolute joke, and they proved it again today. They fined the LA Lakers $500,000 for violating the league's anti-tampering rule. What you need to know, everybody, is that this isn't about the first issue. We all saw and heard Magic Johnson hanging out with Jimmy Kimmel. We heard him talking a little bit about Paul George, and some people thought that, no, this is not about this. This is about after that. They decided that after that, the rules were broken, and the general manager, Rob Pelinka, contacted the agent for Paul George, and for that, the Lakers get a $500,000 fine, and $500,000 to an NBA team is a joke.
What are you talking about, man? It's $500,000. They got him good, got him where it hurts. This is clearly going to curb the NBA's tampering problem and really put a stop to all the shenanigans going on out here in these NBA off seasons, except it's not at all because no one's ever taken tampering that seriously. So they weren't going to start now. All this does is kind of signal. We love precedent is like another one of those buzzwords in sports, especially during the off season, a.k.a. CBA season, a.k.a. the rules refresher for everyone before real sports action gets going. And one of the things you always heard talked about, whether it's the Zeke Elliott case that's going on right now, Vontaze Burfict getting suspended for 5 games that got reduced to 3 under the new rules. Everyone loves defending precedents. And this is another one of those where it says, all right, if we actually catch you out here tampering and you have to go above and beyond to make that even a possibility, this is what you have to look forward to.
I feel like this is the NBA coming in and saying, man, if you're going to be so blatant that we have to do something, here's $500,000. Now, the $500,000, again, this is the second offense, essentially. The first offense, which we now know, according to the NBA, received a warning, was this appearance by Magic Johnson on Jimmy Kimmel Live. This is what Magic said.
Who are you looking for? Paul George? Is it Chris Paul are you looking at? Maybe Teen Wolf? Do you remember him? He was really good.
I wish I could talk about all those guys.
But you'd be contract tampering now.
Exactly.
Did you have, when you started this job, did they sit you down and say, okay, so here are some things you have to know? You can't do an interview and say you want the specific player.
That's right.
And did you have to learn?
Yeah, I had to go to school. I had to go to CBA school, salary cap school, and tampering school.
What constitutes tampering? Like if you're on vacation and you run into Paul George, are you not allowed to speak to him?
No, we're going to say hi because we know each other.
I see.
You just can't say, hey, I want you to come to the Lakers, even though I'm going to be winking like, you know what that means, right?
That got Magic Johnson a warning. I mean, even Kimmel knew what tampering was, and Magic Johnson just told you he went to tampering school. He obviously failed.
He's just sitting there like, ha, 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 I'm Magic. Yeah, we can't be out here tampering, but, I see Paul George around. Guys about town. Paul George likes L.A. I like L.A. We got similar interests like that. We might end up at the same spot. I don't see anything wrong with this. Wink, wink, back slap. But that is kind of the weird thing, right? Because Magic's just used to having been able to be this guy. He's just gotten to be Magic out in the public for a long time. And he's got the ownership stake in the Dodgers, and he runs all these businesses. And he's a guy that just in general has a lot of friends. And to be honest, it's cool to say you're friends with Magic on the other end too. And so he's got this awe and this draw to him. And it's hard to probably turn that off now in the role he's in, and that becomes an interesting part of this. Is how does Magic adjust to this?
Well, but the funny thing is, Magic's a smart guy. You just mentioned he owns all these businesses. All he had to do in that interview was leave the last line out. I mean, he can come in and say, no, I know him. We're going to see each other. We'll say hi. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. But I can't say anything about wanting him to play for the Lakers. And then, bam. If he cuts that one line shorter, he's fine.
But that's now, that's like being in the NFL and the drug testing policy. Like, the drug testing policy is a joke in the NFL, but once you get popped, anything else that comes up, as minor as it might be and as much as it may not have gotten you in trouble before, starts to ring a little louder. With Magic, this was what got them a warning. Like, Magic's role in all of this was that. Rob Pelinka went out after and actually did the dirt that got them fined for this. Like, he went and contacted the agent. He did the actual sort of tampering in all this.
Well, and Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks. Here's some straight talk. Rob Pelinka used to be an agent. So you can't screw up tampering when you used to be an agent. Like, he's not screwing up. This isn't a mistake. This is a blatant, I don't care. I mean, that's a substantial difference. And besides the fact that he doesn't care, and despite the fact that he's coming out and saying, yeah, I don't follow the rules, we're the Lakers, we do what we want to, the fine is $500,000. I feel like the toilet paper budget for that organization is more than $500,000 a year.
But that's what I mean. So now you've got no incentive on the back end. That's the precedent that you set. It's sort of like the parent that just doesn't want to be bothered with the fact that knowing that their kid is, going out and partying and carrying on in high school. Just don't leave the beer cans in my front lawn and we'll be cool. Make sure I don't know about it. But if you're going to go on national TV and then back it up with the actions, we have to come out and do something. But it's basically enough something to say, just make sure you're a little more covert about it, because that's a good point with Rob Pelinka. Being an agent, this is another kind of weird gray area for him. Like, if he's talking to his agent, he's probably talking to a guy he had a relationship before. He knows better, but he also kind of understands you operate in a weird gray area, and you've got to be cognizant. Like, when I was at Notre Dame, when I was around with my friends and we'd go out to dinner with my parents or something like that, we would always have to be careful if my friends were there because they're my parents. If I were to go out to dinner with any number of my teammates' other parents and they wanted to pay for it, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. But if my parents do, because they're technically donors to the school in their own small way, that pops up as something that could have been potentially an NCAA infraction. And so normally when you think about it as innocently as you do is saying, well, that's just Mike's parents. Like, no, you can't treat it that way because you know the NCAA doesn't. Magic and Rob just learned that the NBA is not going to play, as I say this in air quotes, not going to play about that, as they clearly don't care.
He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. It's the right time with Bomani Jones. So at some point, I feel like this is a little bit like the anti-NFL punishment. You know how we see the NFL makes punishment, everybody makes a big deal about it, then they appeal it, then we end up talking about that punishment for weeks. It makes the process drag on, and then we don't know what's happening. This is one of those things where it feels like they picked a dollar amount that's so low, the Lakers look at it and they're like, all right, we'll just write that check. I mean, it just goes away.
Well, because the punishment sort of fit the crime, and maybe not in the actual sense, because in theory, tampering with a player's contract is something that you should want to guard against, but the NBA has long since, that quote-unquote legal tampering period that we always hear about has kind of been the mockery that this has been for a while now. And so you've got something that people generally don't look at as that serious, and then you back it up with a fine that matches that. This isn't deflated footballs getting you a multi-game suspension in the NFL where it doesn't seem like the punishment fits the crime, and then you have all of these weird sort of counterbalances when you've got off-the-field things that require a larger suspension looking the same. Like, that's where the NFL gets in trouble, and the NBA is like, no, we're going to treat this with the relative level of severity that we think it deserves, and it deserves a $500,000 fine.
But you have to look at it at some point
and
say,
punch the mic?
Yeah, I did. I punched the mic. I'm so fired up about this. I punched the mic. The mic fell on me. I can't
Jason
handle technology.
Fitz hates tampering.
If you're going to sign a player for $200 million in that range, you're going to give some guy $200 million, whatever NBA superstar you want. And you look around the league now and you say, okay, if I want to get a head start on that process, it's going to cost me $1 million. It's worth it. I mean, if it gets you a head start on whatever player you want next year, you're looking at it now saying, okay, $500,000 is the fine for talking to an agent when I can't. I'd pay that easily on top of my $200 million contract to get an advanced head start on the signing of Paul George. You talk about precedent. It's a terrible precedent by the NBA.
When you're coming out and you're getting ready to sign an agent and go into the sports world, one of the things that everyone is very quick to tell you is that money the agent spends on your training, the money spends, taking you out to meals, whatever they put into you, you're not expected to give them that back even if things go south. Like, if you don't get signed and nothing works out, they shouldn't be expecting to get that money back. They tell you that's the cost of doing business. And you found out that, like you said, the cost of doing business sometimes for the potential of a $200 million max contract player might be $500,000. It's the cost of doing business that I think, based on those dollar amounts, they're willing to incur.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. As we look at it, there's also no doubt about the fact that Mike Golick Jr. and I are incredibly excited today. College football getting into high gear. Ohio State taking on Indiana. That's going to happen tonight. We're going to have it all over the ESPN family of networks, obviously. We'll talk a little bit about it because I'm not sure we're not forgetting about Ohio State and one of their key players in all the hype of the college football season. We'll tell you who it is and why we should be talking about him. It's The Right Time with Bomani Jones. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Golick Jr., I'm Jason Fitz. You're listening to The Right Time with Bomani Jones. You can get in touch with us on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at mgolickjr57, at Jason Fitz. Always love having the interaction with you guys there. More importantly, today is the day of giving. There's an awesome opportunity to help people affected by Hurricane Harvey. You can visit redcross.org/ESPN, or as we've been telling everybody all day, really simple. If you text the word Harvey in all caps, HARVEY, to 90999, you can make a $10 donation. It's an amazing opportunity to help the people of Houston try and give back, help each other get through what's obviously a very difficult situation for everybody there. Harvey, all caps, HARVEY, to 90999. So Mike Golick Jr., college football really gets underway today, which has you dancing in the aisles and doing cartwheels and all sorts of excitement, I know. Ohio State taking on Indiana tonight. And the Buckeyes, I'm not going to say the Buckeyes are being underhyped because I feel like everybody's in love with the Buckeyes.
Possible,
right?
Yeah.
We know that, although I do feel like it feels like it's sort of an Alabama world. But the Buckeyes getting a sufficient amount of hype. But J.T. Barrett seems to be sort of forgotten in this entire process. And I realized that maybe last year wasn't the year that he wanted to have. But when you look at J.T. Barrett, do you look at J.T. Barrett and think this is a guy that can win a national championship?
I think around this team, yes. Like J.T. Barrett, it's one of those guys that last year, I think a few games really tainted an otherwise pretty sterling legacy. Like even just going back over the game logs, you remember, all right, less than stellar performances, like 46% completion percentage against Michigan, 45 against Michigan State, 42 against Indiana. Like those few instances for a guy that, listen, ultimately over the years has stacked up a lot of those records, is on the verge, already holds the Ohio State career record for touchdowns responsible for with 100, 6 shy of matching Purdue's former quarterback, you may have heard of him, Drew Brees, for the Big Ten record. 8,846 career yards of total offense, second most in program history, and he's 5 yards behind that. So he's going to own all of the major Ohio State records from scrimmage. He's going to own a couple of the Big Ten ones in there as well. He's done it at a high level. I think it was Big Ten Player of the Year a couple of years ago in addition to all these other accolades. But you saw last year, especially when outside of Curtis Samuel, the weapons were lacking on that offense last year for the most part. It eliminated some of what they were able to do for the deep ball, but J.T. Barrett just seemed in unfortunately timed places to be inaccurate enough to make us question some things about him.
Well, and I'm not going to say that's not rightfully so, right? You know, and there are obviously limitations to J.T. Barrett's game, accuracy being the big one. But aren't we going to get some of those questions answered tonight? I mean, well, I understand that Ohio State-Indiana is not the riveting matchup that's making some people sort of clamor up and down. There is the opportunity to see what J.T. Barrett looks like under Kevin Wilson, the new offense coordinator. And at some point you have to look at it and say, okay, they brought in Kevin Wilson for a specific purpose. This is an offense last year that was putrid at times, and what stuck in most of our minds is a 31-0 loss in the playoffs. So the only way you wipe that out is a big performance. And I think that J.T. Barrett can do that. I think that Kevin Wilson can come in tonight and they can have sort of this about the only win for Ohio State, aside from beating the snot out of Indiana, is what does the offense look like in the process. And if J.T. Barrett comes out and looks efficient, we're going to be all over the hype train for him.
Yeah, by the way, what an interesting undercurrent to all this is Kevin Wilson seeing his old team in Indiana that he left behind amidst a lot of controversy and a lot of less than stellar things. You heard about him and some of the treatment of players around there on his way out. But speaking specifically again to J.T. Barrett, you're right. He should benefit from that. The offense suffered, however you want to slice it. Tom Herman compared to Ed Werner as the offensive coordinator last year, so that should help. But look what he's being judged again is a lot of the other quarterbacks that we've seen rise to prominence during that time period. You look at J.T. Barrett, and yeah, he's given you a bit of both, but he had one 300-yard passing game last year. If we're going to just use that kind of top-level output as something something to judge on in this situation. He had one 300-plus yard passing game last year, and it was against Bowling Green in the first game of the season, I think. Lamar Jackson had, just going down the list and doing it now, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, including 2 400-plus yard passing games for him. You look at Sam Darnold out in Southern Cal, and it's a lot of the same story for him. Last year, you had, again, in less games, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a 453-yarder to end the season. So you have guys with wild top-level output that are being touted as big-time pro prospects that have tended to overshadow Barrow at that time period.
But at some point you look at it and say, more than any other sport, college football seems to be dictated at times by the coaches, right? There's a point where the programs are identified by the coaches, and then at some level, some programs identified by the coordinators. How much credit does Lane Kiffin get in some process of talking about Alabama and what they did? And that's what I think Ohio State fans are looking for Kevin Wilson to be, is that sort of guy that you can credit for being able to maximize whatever your guys are best at. That's what Kevin Wilson is supposed to be able to do. And you have to look at it and say, if Kevin Wilson could make Indiana a competitive football team and offensively a good football team at times, and if he could make Indiana a team that was capable of, in fact, competing with Ohio State in some of these games, what can he do for J.T. Barrett? That's the real question we're going to have answered here, because at some point you're looking at it and saying, if you believe that Alabama and Ohio State are the top two teams in the country, they both have new coordinators. So which one's going to maximize the players on the field? If that's Kevin Wilson, then the Ohio State hype train is rightfully headed where it should be.
It is. Listen, they're never going to be a shortage of talent, but at some point, too, you mentioned coaches and all this. You can have a serious conversation about Urban Meyer the way a lot of people had about his ability to develop actual pro-competent quarterbacks. And we know, for better or for worse, a lot of the way we view quarterbacks is through the lens of what's he going to look like on the next level. Presuming you're not a transcendent college player the way Tim Tebow was when he was under him at Florida, one of the best college quarterbacks we've ever seen. Alex Smith, I mean, he's been a very good pro. He's been an average quarterback. A game manager was his quarterback at Utah. You look at the quarterbacks he had at Florida, and now at Ohio State. It doesn't seem like it's a system necessarily that has produced so far for him high-level NFL draft picks at quarterback.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to. I mean, at some point, you're right. Are any of us looking at J.T. Barrett and saying, hey, if you're throwing up, 42% accuracy against Indiana, you're probably not an NFL quarterback in the mindset of many. But at the same time, if we buy into accuracy can't be fixed mechanically in many quarterbacks, even if he's not there, all Ohio State needs for him to be is a little bit better, just a little bit better than he was last year, a little more consistent, and they're going to find themselves as one of the top two teams in the country. It's pretty simple for them.
Yeah, and again, those games were, 3 outliers where those numbers dipped into a really bad and dangerous place, but those were enough in key places, especially being against a bad Michigan State team last year that somehow gave Ohio State a run for their money, against Michigan in the biggest game of their season, in the game against Clemson where the output wasn't there. I mean, 19 for 33 for $127, just smothered. And that's not all on him. Like, this was an Ohio State team that was young last year, that didn't always do a great job of protecting JT last year. And outside of Curtis Samuel, really lacked an offensive threat that you were really worried about. I simultaneously felt bad for J.T. Barrett and wondered, understood the outcry from a lot of people last year. Because, yeah, he looked inaccurate, but there were times I turned on those games last year, and I said, that guy is on an island all by himself trying to win these games. And, man, it doesn't look like a lot of fun after all the toys he used to have to play with there.
You guys know all of our guests appear on the right time via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, and one of our favorites going to join us up next. He's calling the game. Ryan McGee going to join us from ESPN. We'll get his thoughts on what to look for. We'll do that next up on the right time with Bomani Jones. I'm Jason Fitz. He's Mike Golick Jr. Handcrafted. It's all the rage. From flour-pressed soap to handmade hot sauce to artisanal pickles. I still haven't had one, but they sound delicious. Well, Firestone Complete Auto Care is glad it's catching on because they've been handcrafting repairs since 1926. And their 4,000 ASC certified technicians work hard every day to help keep cars running like new. Before people were making organic greeting cards and rock jewelry in their basements, Firestone Complete Auto Care has been hard at work in the garage, tightening, torquing, wrenching, and they back that work with their fixed right promise, guaranteeing your car is fixed right, your repair is priced right, and the work is completed right on time. Keep your car running newer longer. When the road gets tough, You need a set of tires that can get there. Right now, Firestone Complete Auto Care gets $70 by mail on a Bridgestone Visa prepaid card when you buy a set of 4 eligible Bridgestone tires. Whatever you drive a Firestone. Offer valid August 10th through October 8th. In-store only. Claim form required. Excludes Blizzak. Restrictions apply. See claim form for eligible tires and details. Prepaid card issued by the Bancorp Bank. Member FDIC.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Junior, I'm Jason Fitz. You're listening to The Right Time with Bomani Jones. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. All of our guests on The Right Time appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. One of our favorites covering the game tonight. You could see Ohio State, Indiana tonight on ESPN. Ryan McGee joins us. And, Ryan, we'll start right out of the gate. Since both Mike Golick Jr. and I have had the opportunity to hang out with you on your weekend show, which one of us do you like better?
See, that's not cool. I'm not sure what to say. So both of you bailed out Marty at some point because I think we all agree he's more important than any of us. So when he bailed, each one of you stepped in, and I appreciate that. And I'm not going there. Hey, I tell you this though, I feel like it's Monday down at ESPNU all of a sudden. Like all of a sudden, I mean, like you're sitting in the green room and talking to you guys because that's what we did all last year.
It does feel oddly familiar right now, and I'm into it. But listen, you bring up Marty, and we all talk about Marty being the most interesting guy at ESPN and seeing him all over the place. But the last time I heard you calling into your own show, you were doing it from a train car bathroom overseas. So have you one-upped that now? Do you feel like you're giving Marty a run for his money?
Yeah, I've told him, I said, he's called into the show from Shanghai after talking to Ronaldo, and he's called into the show from like the World Special Olympics, and he was with someone. And I said, no one will ever call in again from the Glacier Express train toilet. And while someone was beating on the door because they were mad that there was an American in there yapping.
Incredible. Talking to Ryan McGee on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. So you are not in the Glacier Express right now. You are getting ready to cover Ohio State, Indiana. For the rest of us college football fans, we're all thankful this is getting going, but the conversation Fitz and I were just having, J.T. Barrett, the Ohio State quarterback, it seems like is coming into this season under the radar, forgotten about, however you want to phrase it. What's the sense of that around this Ohio State team?
Yeah, no, you're right. Listen, I was in Columbus yesterday, and literally while I'm talking to you guys, I'm pulling into my parking spot in Bloomington. So I made the drive over today. And, no, they absolutely, that's the case, and they kind of dig it. Like, it's hard to imagine a program like Ohio State, finding chip on the shoulder, we get no respect motivation. But that's exactly what they've done. I mean, listen, I'm like you guys. I have one copy of every college football preview magazine, published, known to man every summer. And Barrett was on the cover of one of them. And everybody else either had Mayfield or they had, even where I live in North Carolina, they have Hunter Renfrow from Clemson. I mean, they got all these guys except for Barrett. And I really think he kind of digs it. Now, listen, I saw Ohio State 3 times last year. And they were 2-1 in those games. And one of those games was at Wisconsin, and it was an overtime win. He spent the entire game on his back. And so it doesn't matter how good he is if he doesn't stay upright. And so I think if goal number 1 this year is to make sure that he has a chance to be the guy that we saw, his freshman year. And so I like him a lot. And he reminds me a lot of like Chris Leak or Tebow or some of the other great Urban Meyer quarterbacks. And so, again, if they can keep him on keep him standing upright, I think he can take care of business. He'll do that tonight. It's just a question later in the year if they can do it.
Brian, what do you think? Can Ohio State win a national championship with J.T. Barrett?
They can. I think they totally can. But I think that's but again, that's the biggest question. I mean, when I saw them last year, their defense was really good. And I'm not talking about the playoff loss, but their defense was really good. They had a hard time scoring points, and I never felt like it was his problem. In fact, I go back to that Wisconsin game. He single-handedly won that Wisconsin game, and I wrote that night, which was, he did what great quarterbacks do. He just at some point went, okay, if I have to do all this, I'm going to have to do it. And he learned a lesson on a bad pass in the first half, and then that's the exact pass he threw, corrected, that won the game in overtime.
Ryan, looking at now the relationship that's always important in college, especially between quarterback and offensive coordinator, they bring Kevin Wilson over. How much of an effect do you think he has on that offense this year? And what's the scenario like for him tonight going up against his former team where he was a head coach for so long and left under less than ideal circumstances, let's say?
Yeah, you talk about chip on the shoulder, and he recruited every kid he's going to be coaching against tonight. He knows where the weak spots are. Now, that being said, you could argue the other side of that, which is that, in Indiana, they also know him pretty well. But and there's motivation on that side too, because like you say, it was not. I mean, it was an ugly situation. People, I've been in town an hour, and someone had brought it up to me, just like at the burger joint. So it's going to be an interesting time. But just football wise, he's what Barrett needs, because he had no talent at Indiana, and there were times last year where Indiana was moving the football. And, they were top 50 ranking in offense, which is the first time I can think of in forever that's happened down here, certainly not since the Cam Cameron days. And so I think he is the answer, because he's going to open it up a little bit, because, like I say, and listen, since the departure of Tom Herman, it's been a wide open is not how I would term that.
You guys can follow him on Twitter at ESPN McGee. Covering the game tonight, which obviously you can see on ESPN coverage all day as we get you set for the beginning of college football. Ryan, thanks for taking some time and joining us, man. Be safe out there. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm looking at something that I thought I'd never see, boys. I'm just looking at football traffic jam in Bloomington, Indiana.
Oh, that's
what
amazing.
A time to be alive.
Oh, that's great. Great stuff from Ryan. Who would have thought? That, but that's what's happening. We're all stoked for it. He believes in JT Barrett. And believes in this process. I'm still looking at it, seeing tonight there's only a couple of outcomes that are going to have some sort of a result for the world to analyze. If JT Barrett looks terrible, we're going to flip out over it. Unfortunately, if he comes out and looks fantastic, I still don't think he's going to get a ton of benefit of the doubt in the process, because it's Indiana, right? I mean, I think at some point there's not a huge win for Ohio State here, other than the fact that they just come out to get a win.
Ohio State's going to win this game handily, I'd imagine. Now, they're going out on a limb. They're opening up the season with a Big Ten opponent, which is something that doesn't happen with a ton of regularity. But this Ohio State team is so talented. They were one of the youngest teams, if not the youngest team in college football last year. We're going to see the payoff of that, and the headline is going to be college football season is here, and it looks exactly like what we expected.
We're brought to you by Pennzoil Synthetics, taking synthetic motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. Speaking of headlines, the Ball family can't get out of the headlines, but now there's another shoe, and it's not for the Ball you think it is. We'll tell you who's got his own signature shoe and why it's a big deal next on the Right Time with Bomani Jones. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Mike Golick Jr., I'm Jason Fitz. It's the Right Time with Bomani Jones. Hang out with us. We love everybody. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776 ESPN Radio. Presented by Progressive Insurance. Guys, also don't forget, it's an opportunity right now where you can help people. The Hurricane Harvey, let's help Houston. We can all come together by going to www.redcross.org/ESPN. Or if you just want to use your phone right now, text 90999 is the number. Text the word Harvey in all caps. Makes a $10 donation on the Disney Day of Giving. We'd like to help Houston as much as we can. So, Mike, I'm looking around, and I'm looking at, shoe news. We were talking yesterday about how you can now rent jerseys. But if you're going to do that, you got to have some sweet, sweet kicks, as the kids say. And really, I just say that to watch you roll your eyes. Right?
No, the kids don't say that.
That's the goal. So sweet, sweet kicks, as the kids say. And so I'm looking at it, and the Ball family back in the news. But it's not the way I expected, because what we now know is the youngest Ball brother, LaMelo, 16 years old, high school junior, will now have his own signature shoe, and it will be part of the Big Baller brand. Now, there are several layers to this, because you were just talking about how it's complicated when you were in school and you wanted to go out to dinner, and you have to be worried about somebody can't just buy your dinner, because you're always worried about any rules with academic eligibility. Well,
yeah, no one ever bought us dinner.
Well,
never
good.
happened.
Good,
Ever.
because It's important that not happen because you have to worry about your eligibility. Apparently, LeVar not worried about that at all. And he essentially, his quote is, "We'll worry about it when we get there. Who cares? If he can't play, then he can't play. It doesn't mean he'll stop working out and getting better." When you see that LaMelo has his own shoe, what hits you about that?
Well, it's only $395, and I'm going to be honest. If I'm just looking at the shoe and taking it as face value, it's kind of nice. Like, I am much more inclined to look twice at this one than I was at the Zo 2s. Like, the Zo 2s weren't as bad as a lot of people made them out to be in my mind, but looking at these basically look like the Under Armour cross trainers. They just have, like, a snakeskin pattern instead. Are they, like, is the big baller band kind of learning? Are they evolving? Are they just clearly poaching shoe sort of, ideas from other companies? I don't know, but they're kind of nice. The only thing better, though, is the ridiculous big baller brand promotional video that went along with this, which includes, by the way, a brand new verse from Lonzo. Lonzo Ball is on the track. It happened.
And you're happy with that? Like, you want? I mean, if I'm Lonzo, I'm conflicted, by the way, because if I'm Lonzo, my little brother just got a shoe that's cooler than mine on this whole brand. I mean, there's this. You're right. Maybe they're learning and they're figuring it out, but that means that Lonzo is going to be sort of the test study in every one of these cases. And here he is with LaMelo getting a cooler shoe. I mean, I would be angry if I'm Lonzo.
It's all just set up for them to drop the Zo 1s. Like, we all keep wondering where the Zo 1s were and how we skipped to the 2s. This is the perfect dot. You go back, you drop that one. Like, he's got another in a long line of shoes. He knows his brother's in high school. He's going to get one right now. The interesting thing now is, like, going to, like, in a serious component, although I do want to get back to Alonzo's verse before, because like, that, too, like, unexpectedly kind of nice. Like, at least the flow was there. I don't know, like, everything else we can debate, but I listened to it. I was like, all right, he kind of sounds like he knows what he's doing. And that's coming from someone that's heard a lot of really bad amateur locker room rap.
Would you?
Like, a lot of it. Like, every locker room has got that handful of guys that believes, like, they're all going to make it and, like, gets, like, has a bootleg studio set up or something, and it's all usually really bad. This wasn't that.
Would you spend 99 cents to pay for, I'm not talking Spotify, you millennial. I'm talking about, would you spend 99 cents to pay for Lonzo spitting his flow on a hot track?
Not if you phrase it like that. But, like, listen, I've heard a couple of the things that have come out from Lonzo, and I haven't hated it. So I'm kind of conflicted here. And these shoes, I don't hate. And the thing I now wonder aloud is, so there's no rules in that govern California high school sports that preclude LaMelo Ball from having his own shoe on the market. But when he attends UCLA, the NC2A could have an issue with this. Like, how does this play? This kid can't go to college and wear his own signature shoe, and I can't imagine they're going to be comfortable with him profiting it, considering we just had a punter from, I think, USF that just got shown the door because he wanted to profit off YouTube videos. Like, this is even more overt and in your face.
Yeah, and NCAA spokesperson Emily Janes talked to Darren Ravel earlier and said, this is the quote, "Generally speaking, a college athlete or prospect paid for the use of their athletics, reputation, or ability risks their future eligibility in that sport. This includes profiting from the sale of items bearing the young person's name. NCAA rules, however, do allow prospects to promote commercial products prior to enrollment, providing it is not for pay." So this sort of begs a very interesting case study of what do you do when it's your brother's brand, and how do they pay it, and where does the money go? I mean,
we don't know if he is getting paid. That's
right.
The one thing in all this. We don't know if he's getting paid. And judging by LeVar's cheeky grin at the end of the ad where he's sneaking into the fridge for cherries, who knows if we'll ever really understand it. Because the other portion of all of this, and wondering who's getting what, is that this was his 16th birthday they dropped this for. And he got a Lamborghini for his birthday. Like, this kid's going to show up to Chino Hills in a Lamborghini.
If you were in an NFL
doesn't his other brother have a Ferrari?
Yes. And so I ask you, when you were in a locker room, if you had shown up to your professional sports career in a Lamborghini, what's the reaction?
If I had shown up where in a Lamborghini?
No, in a Lamborghini. You show up in a Lamborghini. You drive up to practice in a Lamborghini. How are all of the other players, if he makes the NBA eventually, how's everybody else going to react to Lamborghini pulling up?
Well, in the NBA, listen, that's a dime a dozen. Like, I saw Antonio Brown pull up on the lot in Pittsburgh in a Rolls Royce and didn't bat an eye. Like, that's that's how guys live. But pulling up to high school like that, like I drove an Envoy. I drove a GMC Envoy in high school.
That's a big boy car for you.
It was nice, though. It was nice, though, right? I put some subwoofers in the back. I was that guy. I was so obnoxious. I beat down the block with that thing.
Yeah.
It was bad. It was really bad.
I had a Dodge K car is what they were called because I'm so old. The thing was just like shaped like a K. It was the ugliest thing.
Can we ask people that? 888-729-3776. What was your high school car? If you were driving a Lambo, let us know because I want to talk to someone with experience in this field.
And like mine needed to be painted, like it was rough. There was nothing, like it rattled as I pulled in. I mean, 888-729-3776. What was your first high school car? Because I want to know if anybody else had a Lamborghini. I think that's incredible. It's a nice little moment by him. Coming up next, Colin Kaepernick blackballed. NFL team executives explain why that theory doesn't stand up. We'll do that next on The Right Time with Bomani Jones, Mike Golick Jr., Jason Fitz.
Thanks for listening to the Right Time Podcast. Please come back tomorrow for more. And don't forget to listen to The Right Time with Bomani Jones from 4 p.m. to 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Welcome to the Right Time Podcast. The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Fitz, he's Mike Golick Jr., and this is The Right Time with Bomani Jones. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Hang out with us. ESPN Radio presented by Progressive Insurance. You can get in touch with us through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at mgolickjr57 for him. I'm at Jason Fitz. Get out to us there, hang out with us. So we'll get to this conversation in a second with you guys about the cars that you drove in high school because it's amazing how many of you want to chime in on it. We love it. But, Mike, I have to talk to you a little bit about an article that's up there on Sports Illustrated. Albert Breer polled some anonymous executives, 3 anonymous execs, and 1 coach to talk about the Colin Kaepernick situation and why or if he's being blackballed. And it's interesting to me because the common argument from them was that you can't say that he's being blackballed looking at, for example, Robert Griffin III, and also looking at, for example, the fact that you would have to tailor an offense specifically around him to be effective, and it doesn't make sense to have your top offense, your main offense, playing one particular style, and then your backup playing another particular style. Now, I look at that, and you know more about football than I do. Most of these people polled, I'm sure, are smart football minds. But I look at it as, for example, a Raiders fan and say, I'm not sure that I can definitively say that E.J. Manuel or Connor Cook is a better backup option for Oakland than Colin Kaepernick. So does it make sense to you when you look at it and you think, okay, Colin Kaepernick is so specialized he can only run a particular type of offense?
No, and I think that kind of got borne out the second that a coach left and he came in and he operated under a new system, right? Like, you can't get much more of a stark departure from what Jim Harbaugh was running than what Chip Kelly was running. I understand both of them made use somewhat of read option elements, but Alex Smith was running that too, and we don't seem to have a problem with him having a job on the other end. Like, there's just so many places. Like, the weird thing for me about this is we got to this place a long time ago with the anthem protest where people said, all right, we're not really saying anything new when we talk about this. And if we're doing that here, I think I heard Dan Levitar bring this up on SportsCenter, that everyone in the sports talk vein has kind of grown tired of this because there aren't a lot of new angles to this. And that comes on the other side where it's us in the media being accused of caping for Colin Kaepernick and trying to get him a job. Well, then we get this piece written up that just posits a bunch of old reasons that we've already worked through as to why Colin Kaepernick's not having a job. Like, he's a system guy. What about RG3? Because every black mobile quarterback is the same guy who remains unsigned. Like, RG3 didn't go out and protest the anthem, so that's not a factor in why he's unsigned. We've seen RG3 much more severely injured over the course of this. Like, there's just a litany of reasons I don't feel like I should have to explain why their situations aren't comparable. And yet we're hearing these same recycled takes, but because they're coming from anonymous execs, we're supposed to believe that they have any more validity than they did before.
Well, doesn't at some point an exec in the NFL have some validity? And I know that we turn around and we sort of roll our eyes at the words anonymous in any of these or sources say in any of these. But I can also see why, given the firestorm that is around this, wouldn't you agree that if you were an NFL executive and you had this opinion, you probably wouldn't want to go on record with it? You don't want the backfire that comes from it. So the only way you're going to talk is anonymously. And if these are execs and coaches that are in the thick of it saying it, that has more validity than you and I and any of the other shows on ESPN saying it, doesn't it?
I guess, but I know enough football people that have gone out and given us concrete examples. Because that's the one thing. This was the narrative very early on, and I think I might have even fallen into some of the trappings. And then you go back and you start to look, and you have people that are actually going to pay attention enough to look and not just take it at face value and say, well, that's not, these things aren't exactly true. And again, when you compare this all through the lens of, well, this is also talking about right now when we've had these expanded rosters where he's clearly better than a lot of other guys. Like, man, if you want to say that behind the scenes we don't know how much Colin has asked for, and that could be a legitimate thing brought up in all of this. If you can bring up behind the scenes proof that Colin Kaepernick has asked that he wants to be a starter, and that's a factor in all this. But when before you've talked about people saying diminished skill set coupled with not wanting to deal with the hassle, and then you come out and say, well, he's a system guy, and all these things that we already left aside before, that most of the people arguing on that side left behind the fore, I'm just less inclined to take this seriously.
In your mindset, you mentioned the expanded rosters. And for anyone that doesn't know, rosters used to have multiple cuts. Right now, most rosters are at 90, and typically they would have gone from 90 to 75, 75 to 53. That's not the way they're doing it this year for the first time. All the rosters are sitting at 90, and then this weekend they'll go to 53. But there's another curious aspect of this. The contracts in the NFL, once you pass the beginning of the league season, contracts are week to week. Is there any logic to bringing in Colin Kaepernick at that point when you don't have to commit to him for an entire season if you don't think he's a good enough player?
Well, I mean, contracts are week to week.
Well, I mean, if you're an NFL veteran and you sign on the 5th day of the league year and you're cut after 2 weeks, you're only paid for 2 weeks. If you're an NFL veteran and you're on the rosters today and you make the roster on the opening day, then this year's salary is guaranteed.
Well,
so
then
there's a difference.
Again,
if you're a $7 million player, that's the difference between paying you $7 million or the difference between paying you 2/16 of $7 million.
Well, then again, all of these reasons are even less valid, right? Because if you're going to bring a guy in for a couple of weeks of spot duty when you supposedly have to design this whole elaborate system around him and he doesn't fit what you're doing, like that's an even more ridiculous premise. So if that ends up coming to fruition, then it proves even more with the lies. Where like we've had owners stand up and tell us what the trepidation is on their side of things. And if those are the guys actually calling the shots and making the decisions, then I don't know why we're going to act like we were being lied to there. Like when they were forthright enough to say, like, we're worried about the backlash we're getting for fans. When Steve Bisciotti's out here saying, pray for us while we make this decision. Like, he wasn't praying for us to figure out how to integrate the minor portions of the read option into the offense.
Fair point. That's absolutely a fair point. But at some point, like, whose word can we take then? If we can't take the word of anonymous execs, then at this point, whose word will you take as sort of a valid reason?
Did you hear what you just said?
Yeah.
If we won't take the word of anonymous executives?
But then, I mean, that begs the question of whose word will you take? Like, who can come out and give you a valid reason that will make sense?
If a coach wanted to stand up in front of a microphone with his face in front of it, the way everyone else having this conversation would, and said, these are the reasons I don't believe Colin is signed, I'd be a little more inclined to hear him out than a guy who can sit behind a closed door and say all this stuff that feeds into larger points that, again, we've had all these talks on the outside, and we've largely debated them. Now, again, they can be very, honest and open and forthright about these being their honest decisions, but that doesn't necessarily make them right. Like, that just might indicate that you've got guys making decisions that are suspect at best.
I guess. I mean, the lose-lose situation out of it is obviously until he signs to a roster, if he signs to a roster, all we can do is speculate to what's going on. And then the flip side of the problem is that for all that speculation, we can't trust anything we're being told by anybody in the process. You're just going to constantly run in a circle on it is what it feels like. It feels like we can't actually get any definitive stance on it because we don't take anybody's word on what they're saying. And in the process, nobody's signing Kaepernick. So the process never ends. It's just it's a cycle over and over again. And I think that
there's no cycle. No one's going to sign him. He's not getting signed. Like we've been playing this game where we just keep moving the goalpost back for a really long time, seeing what happens. He's not going to get signed, and us trying to parse through reasons why while we're getting quotes anonymously from guys that can say, this is it. We operate from a position of power because we're in the NFL and we're inside the machine, but not so much so that we're actually willing to tag our name on a lot of this. Basically tells me that, all right, you know what? They're going to prop whatever reason they want up there, and Colin's not going to get signed, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it.
And at what point then do we accept that? If that's just the way it's going to be, at what point do we just say, to Levertard's point, at what point do we just stand up and say, all right, guys, like it or not, this is just the way it's going to be?
Well, it's not a this is the way it's going to be thing. It's accepting it that way. What Dan was talking about was from a content standpoint like this, where it says, how many times can we do this? But my point is, we should kind of hold that accountable to the other side, right? Like when we worked through all these arguments and we said, well, there's nothing new to talk about. Well, if you say the same thing over again from a place of anonymity, then you're not really giving us anything new to talk about either, but you're trying to act like it's somehow the defining, exclamation point on this conversation, and I just don't really care.
Yeah, well, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just don't think that there's a win for most executives to come out and say, if this is what they believe, whether we think it's right or wrong, it's certainly not a win for whoever this executive is from whatever team they are. That they represent. There's not a win for that executive come out and say this, even if it's what they believe, because the backfire it will be massive, and they will suddenly be in the news for every reason they don't want to be in the news. So because they'd
be asked to prove it.
Maybe, but even above and beyond that, if we're talking about just the conversation your owner does or doesn't want you having, don't you think there's a spot where multiple owners in the NFL are going to turn around and say, why would you come out and have this statement? Why would you put us in this position where we as an organization are defending it?
Listen, I get the role that anonymous sources play when it comes to breaking stories and things like that, and we just had one of those NFL top 100 lists where it allows coaches to speak more freely on certain guys and in certain veins. But in this case, it just seems like it gives you the ability to duck. It gives you the ability to justify completely why you're doing something without having to really answer for it personally, without having to back it up in ways that people can challenge publicly. It just seems like you're avoiding the fight just so you can say you're right, because in the end, the results are going to back up your point.
You mentioned the top 100 list, and one of the top players on that top 100 list still has not reported to camp. What does it mean, and is he going to get to play whenever he finally comes in? We'll tell you about it next. It's The Right Time with Bomani Jones. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Right Time with Bomani Jones. 888-SAY-ESPN. 888-729-3776. ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. We talked about it earlier. The top 100 list came out recently, and on the ESPN top 100 list for players around the NFL, Aaron Donald sat at number 3. That's a pretty substantial number. And despite that, I'm looking at it, and my mind's a little blown that the number 3 player in the league, at least according to one survey, the number 3 player in the league isn't in camp, and it hasn't been the end-all, be-all only story that everybody wants to talk about. I'm surprised that Aaron Donald not being in camp with the Rams isn't a bigger deal.
It's flown under the radar. Really, a lot of big headlines surrounding the lack of availability for players throughout this offseason has flown under the radar. We did this with Andrew Luck's shoulder until very recently, with Cam Newton not being on the field practicing with the team until recently. It's been amazing what we've pushed aside in favor of all the other headlines we discussed, but Aaron Donald now seeming to be the last one coming to a head outside of Andrew Luck, who we hear is going to be out probably into the season, and Cam Newton who's back on the field. This is the best thing the Rams have going for them, and he's not with your team right now.
I mean, you really think about it. You have Aaron Donald and Le'Veon Bell, 2 guys that are stars in this league that haven't reported to their team yet, and we don't know what Aaron Donald's point or his approach is when he's going to come in. If these were 2 rookies that were holding out, the world would be just, the sky would be falling. It's not that long ago in this CBA, before they changed everything with the rookie contracts, that a first overall pick holding out, a Jamarcus Russell holding out, was the end of the world. Now you have actual, not possible stars. You have actual stars not playing with their teams, and we're just sort of like, it'll figure itself out. I'm surprised by it.
I'm surprised by it just because if you're the Rams, who else are you paying at this point?
Right.
Like, who else are you going to do this with? And this is another one of those places where the P word comes back into place and we get a little precedent talk. But at the end of the day, if there's one guy, because I've always said this, when you look around any football locker room, but even an NFL locker room, guys understand that all things are not created equal. Like, I never sat in my locker room at Notre Dame and thought, man, you know what? I deserve to be treated the same way that Michael Floyd gets treated, or the same way that Zach Martin gets treated, or the same way one of our quarterbacks gets treated. Because I wasn't as important to the team as those guys, and I wasn't as good as those guys. And if there's any guy in that Rams locker room who can stand up and say he's more important to that team than Aaron Donald, be my guest, because I'll show you the liars in the room on that team. And so if you're going to pay anyone, you pay him. You paid Tavon Austin wideout one money. He's not a wide receiver one. Why would you not pay Aaron Donald best defensive tackle in the game money when he's actually the best defensive tackle in football?
And some can argue the best defensive player in all of football. I mean, there's a point where he holds the leverage here. Whatever he wants, he can ask for. Stephen A. Smith talked about it, and as always, you know when Stephen A. talks about it, it's entertaining. This is what he had to say.
I don't love the fact that Aaron Donald still hasn't been taken care of by the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, the inept franchise that this franchise has been, staining cities along the way, first St. Louis and now L.A. The audacity, the unmitigated gall for them to play hardball and not take care of this guy. I mean, you got to be kidding me. I don't know how many times I got to go on this damn tirade. Take care of Aaron Donald if you are the Los Angeles Rams. The nerve of you to do otherwise. Who the hell do you think you are? You took care of Tavon Austin. You overpaid him, even though I like him. But you can't take care of a dude who is universally recognized as a top 10 player in the NFL, who wants to be there, who is completely justified in not stepping on the field and jeopardizing his own health before he gets a hefty contract, and you can't find a way to take care of him? Shame on you. Absolute positive shame. I mean, just the nerve. I'd expect something like this if Jeff Fisher was still there. But due to the fact that you came to your senses and got rid of him, one would believe that you were pointing sensibly in the right direction. And now we've learned otherwise. It's just a damn embarrassment. Plain and simple.
Jeff Fisher sitting in his house in Tennessee thinking, how did I get dragged into that all of a sudden? I mean, love that from Stephen A. You agree, though?
If you're playing Stephen A. bingo at home, by the way, you're banging on your table because you just won. We were one temerity away from really hitting like the full blackout on the bingo board. I heard unmitigated gall, and I rose up out of my seat. I actually stole that and used that on a podcast earlier today, too. That's how much Stephen A. is embedded in my brain at this point. We were sitting there during the break, and we're like, how do we want to do this Aaron Donald thing? And Nuno goes, you know, we got a Stephen A. rant on this, and the discussion was done. I didn't even know why he asked. Like, no. Stephen A. talks, and he's going on the air.
You lead with that in the future, Nuno, by the way. It's like, hey, guys, before you guys talk about anything, let me tell you what Stephen A.'s got, because that's an unmitigated gall I've decided we can add to our hashtag shirts that eventually I just want to wear around the Bristol campus of ESPN, which is hashtag unmitigated gall. So when I bump into him, I could try and start a little puffin a war with Stephen A.
I was going to say, you got to lead with those two, and then the back of the shirt, like, you know how they almost do it like bumper sticker style on the lower top part of the shirt, like the tramp stamp area? That's where you have, ain't it a burger, though?
Ain't it a burger, though? If you're the Rams and you are in L.A., you are trying to build a fan base, you are trying to build a franchise, and you're trying to distract everybody from the unmitigated disaster that could be Jared Goff. At some point, doesn't showing Aaron Donald a little bit of love and keeping him in the fold and sort of not only signing him, but then going all in on making him the face of the franchise for Los Angeles, doesn't that have some value right now?
Listen, I get that a D tackle is probably not going to sell to an audience, but you look at the rest of that team and forget the on-field trickle-down effect that this has. 28 sacks from 2014 to 2016, 4 more than any other D tackle in the league. 31 QB hits, led the NFL last year. 17 tackles for loss, were tied for the lead last year. How much does that help your young quarterback on the other side to know that your defense could potentially give you extra opportunities by shutting guys down like that? But no. Look at the rest of the locker room and say, if you're not willing to pay that guy, who else in that locker room feels like that organization is really going to be inclined to pay them? Now, I get top guy at the position money is a little different than 4th or 5th down the list, but still, look out in San Diego. Look out in Los Angeles at the Chargers team that came from San Diego. I knew I was going to make that mistake once today. Look at the Chargers. That organization has made a living with their high-profile draft picks. We saw it last year in the stare-down between them and Joey Bosa, not paying their top picks. And everyone around the league knows that reputation of that team. Eli Manning knew it so much back in the day, he refused to go there flat out. And so if you start to build this reputation, it gets talked about. And players know that stuff, and high-profile free agents know it, and everyone else knows on the team, like, man, all right, they're just not going to take care of us no matter what we do.
And I'll argue also fans start to feel it in L.A. too when they look around and say, man, what's wrong with this team that they won't take care of a bona fide superstar on a bad team that needs all the superstars they can get? Speaking of superstars, what's the latest on Aaron Donald? What's the latest on Andrew Luck? The latest on Zeke? We'll get all of it from one of the best in the business. Adam Schefter going to join us next on The Right Time with Bomani Jones. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. NFL fans will do almost anything to help their teams win. Tostitos, the official chip and dip of the NFL, created lucky bags for select NFL teams this season. They participated in team traditions with the hope that doing so would bring luck to each team. They raised a 12th man flag for the Seahawks. They waved the terrible towel for the Steelers bags, and they gave the Broncos bags a mile-high salute. Current NFL players Dak Prescott, Jadeveon Clowney, Joe Flacco, and Aaron Donald all participated to make their team's bags lucky. Visit Tostitos.com to see how Tostitos made your team's lucky bag and pick up one at a store near you.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Golick Jr., I'm Jason Fitz. It's The Right Time with Bomani Jones. ESPN Radio presented by Progressive Insurance. ESPN Radio presented by Progressive Insurance. You could save hundreds on your car, business, or recreational vehicle insurance. I can read. From a local independent agent, go to Progressive.com today. Now that's Progressive. All of our guests appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, and we'll go straight there with one of our favorites, Adam Schefter, ESPN NFL Insider. Adam, we were just talking about Aaron Donald. What's the latest on that situation from what you've heard?
Listen, we're getting close to the regular season. They are in a situation where Aaron Donald wants to be paid like the top defensive player in the game, one of the top defensive players in the game. The Rams think you deserve a new deal. We're ready to make you a very, very highly paid defensive player, but you also have this year and next year left in your contract. So they both have a point, and they're trying to figure out if they can work through it. And they're running out of time to do it.
Adam, is a lot of what we've seen in this, whether it was Odell Beckham choosing to miss what were voluntary offseason workouts, Le'Veon Bell holding out from his tender, and now Aaron Donald doing this, guys maybe taking some of their preseason preparation in their own hands where they're saying, I'm not going to put more hits and more miles on myself than need be while I'm not making this big-time money. I'll just show up for the season?
Well, again, this is one isolated example of that. We could look back at that draft class. Khalil Mack, Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans. There are a lot of great players from that draft class, and they're all in camp except for Aaron Donald. So he's taken a unique approach here to try to get things done here. But to me, it's a situation here where that has not been the majority of – has not been the prevalent feeling amongst those players to use this strategy. He's using it. We're going to see how it works out. They're trying to get a new deal. And, again, the season's now 10 days away, and he's missed all of the summer.
We're talking to ESPN NFL insider Adam Schefter. You mentioned seeing how things work out, Shefty. Ezekiel Elliott, that appeal continues to go on. Do you have any update on that and how you expect that's going to work itself out?
They wrapped up the appeal hearing today, 3 days of testimony in front of the appeals officer, Harold Henderson. Again, I think that each side brought in a forensic expert. Each side had various people speak. And my understanding is that they want a decision from the arbitrator, Harold Henderson, the hearings officer, as soon as possible. And so with that being the case, I was told that maybe by Monday. And again, the Cowboys have to make roster moves this weekend. I don't think that's the NFL or Harold Henderson's concern that they have to do that. Dallas could ultimately have to cut a guy, the 53rd player on its roster, to keep Ezekiel Elliott there until, or if he gets suspended, and then maybe bring him back if he does get suspended. So there's a little bit of risky business here for the Dallas Cowboys, but that's the situation that they're in right now. Thanks to this situation, they're going to have to figure out a way around it unless Harold Henderson renders a decision tomorrow or by Saturday, 4 o'clock. which is possible. But, again, all we know is that they want that as soon as possible and see when he can do it.
Adam, depending on the way this decision goes, what have you heard, if anything, about the Cowboys and their willingness to make this a legal battle should Ezekiel Elliott remain suspended for the 6 games going into the season?
I think Dallas is waiting to see how the appeal goes, and they're waiting to get involved if they have to. And if they do, then that is something that they're preparing to do. I know the Cowboys have been going over the testimony and legal documents from the case here and seeing whether or not they want to pursue legal action. I think that they want to see what Harold Henderson says before they decide to do anything. And, again, everybody's waiting to see what the ruling is. Once we have the ruling from Harold Henderson, Cowboys can decide whether or not they want to take action, and it won't surprise me if they decide to put up a fight.
We're talking to NFL insider Adam Schefter. Shefty, one of the other big stories of this offseason obviously has been Andrew Luck. Can you get a sense or a feel at this point for where he is in his health and if he's going to be ready to go at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be ready to go at the beginning of the season. I think we've got a case here where they've said that he's not going to be placed on the physically unable to perform list, which would sideline him 6 weeks. So I think that we can expect him back before 6 weeks are up, but I think it's looking more and more unlikely that he's going to be ready to open the season. So he's not ready in week 1, and he's ready by week 6. So the truth is that he'll probably wind up playing somewhere between those 2 dates, whether that's week 3 or 4 or whatever it may be. But the Colts are not going to rush him back. They're just not going to do that. They don't want to do that. And so it's a situation where they have to go out and make sure they're careful, because Andrew Luck has gotten hit so hard over the last couple of years, had such a banged-up shoulder. They know how valuable he is, and they want to try to do their best to look out for him. Plus, they're missing Ryan Kelly, their starting center, for 8 weeks with foot surgery. So it's the kind of thing where as much as they'd like to have him back, they're taking a long-range view on this, and they're not rushing him back.
Shefty, before we let you go, got to ask, you're the one Michigan man we've got on the show right now. How are we feeling about the all-maize uniforms going into the game against Florida this weekend? I've got very strong feelings, but I want to hear from the Michigan faithful.
Listen, I'll always support my school and the people who make those decisions, but yellow would not be my choice.
You know what, Shefty? In not so many words, I agree with you. So it's refreshing to hear that level of honesty from someone in the maize and blue. Good luck this weekend, by the way.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate having me.
Fantastic stuff, guys. Follow him on Twitter at Adam Schefter. And I don't know, Golick, I mean, you mentioned that, but when it comes to Shefty, I kind of wanted Shefty to wear an all-maize suit to celebrate it on game day.
If I know anything about what we do with Shefty around this company, because last season I remember watching Sunday Countdown all the time and seeing them out in the lobby throwing Nerf balls at Shefty or throwing dodgeballs at Shefty, putting him in front of the jugs machine with the gloves on. They put him through the ringer over there. So if they can get Shefty into a maize suit, they're going to get Shefty into a maize suit. He is that willing and comfortable enough in his professionalism to go out and do that.
But if there's any guy that can be in the maize suit and own the maize suit, like just really come out and you see it and you say, yeah, I get it. I got it. And it's cool. It's Adam Schefter. Like Adam Schefter could come out in the maize suit, and we would all nod our head with approval. I mean, that's the gift that he has.
He would be able to come out and push that the way Conor McGregor pushed his 4-letter words pinstripe suit before this fight. You can believe that.
No, there's no doubt about it. We'll continue to push to make it happen. When we come back, there's Steeler versus Steeler beef. What's it going to mean for the team going into the season? We'll give you the update on it. It's The Right Time with Bomani Jones. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Golick Jr., I'm Jason Fitz. You're listening to The Right Time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Right Time is brought to you by Firestone Complete Auto Care. Keep cars running newer, longer, whatever you drive a Firestone. Gojo, we'll get into this Steelers beef thing in a second, but I'm still stunned as I look back at this. LaMelo Ball got, for his 16th birthday, essentially LaMelo Ball gets a shoe, his own custom shoe as part of the Big Baller brand line, which is going to be a value at under $400. So he gets his own shoe.
It's a steal. Wait till it kicks under cost.
Yeah.
Then I'm really getting in on that. Those get down to like $150. I'm in.
Is there a price? There's a price point for you on?
Oh yeah, $150, and you get to the one where it's like no shipping, and I can get a promo code that's like another like 15-20% off. I'm in there.
Will
Done.
you spend like
Game
an
over.
hour and a half? Because I got one friend that will spend hours looking for a promo code for that extra like free shipping. And I'll come in and be like, dude, you just saved $15, but you spent 2 hours doing it. So I'm not sure it was really worth your time. Do you have like a patience level on that, or are you just
listen,
committed
that's
to the
assuming
deal?
my time's worth something to begin with. I got
That's a fair
time,
point.
all right? If I'm gonna go and take the time to get the shoes, I'm gonna make sure I get the value. That's just investing in my own happiness on the back end.
Well,
the cost of doing business. We talked about this.
Not only does he get the shoes, he also gets a Lamborghini. And I'm thinking about it, your last name's Golick, which means you're basically famous, right? I mean, that's what happens. When you're a Golick, you're just automatically famous. Was your first car a Lamborghini?
Automatically famous.
Yeah, I mean, because your uncle. I mean, the first time I
College
ever
years,
worked with...
the college years money is strong, let me tell you.
The first time I ever worked with Mike, I told my wife, Sunny, and when I told her, I was like, yeah, I'm doing a show with Mike Golick Jr., her question to me was, oh, my God, was his dad on Saved by the Bell? And I said, no, that was his uncle. But she still, I think that's the starstruck moment, when your uncle's on Saved by the Bell, Lamborghinis for everybody, right?
Yeah, not so much. I drove a GMC Envoy in high school, but the kicker is that I was the guy that put the really bad set of subwoofers in the back and was just rolling down the street at like 7:30 going to school, trying to absolutely rattle the block in Avon, Connecticut, like the most white picket fence country club place on earth. So you can imagine it's a little out of character for the area.
What color was the GMC Envoy?
Standard gray, like nothing. There was no frills about this thing. Drove well. It was a real beauty. I miss it every day.
Yeah, my first car was they called them at the time it was a Dodge Aries. It was called a K car, and they called them that in the late 80s because by the time I got my first car in the 90s, like it was used and had 150,000 miles on it. So I get this Dodge Aries K car that was shaped kind of like a K. It was the ugliest car you could ever possibly imagine. It was sort of a box. It was like a silver needed to be painted box that rattled its way into school. I was proud of that thing, though, man. I was proud of it. Like I had to work hard for that.
Oh, listen, especially whether you're working for it, however you come to the car, like you never forget your first because it's the first time you've got that bit of agency to be like, I got my license. I got a ride. I can go where I want to go. I can see who I want to see. Once you get out of that weird learner's permit phase that they force you through in Connecticut, I can ride around with my guys in the car, my friends in the car. It's a whole new world. It's a dazzling place you never knew.
888 say ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. What was your first car? I'm curious to get a little perspective here on LaMelo and his Lamborghini. What was your first car? 888 say ESPN, 888-729-3776. You can also tweet us on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at mgoligJR57 and at Jason Fitz. So of your friends, like I had one friend, and we're still close actually, and he got a Camaro, and that was like a Camaro in 93, 94. That was a big deal. Like he got a Camaro with T-tops on it. Oh man, that thing, whew. He was the popular friend because he had the nicest car. But some people hated on him a little bit because he had that was for our area. That was a swanky car. Did you have a friend that had like the swanky car everybody loved or hated?
I had a friend who drove a Ford F650. It's basically the size of a dump truck, and it had a boat horn on it. And he would ride down. There was one street to get to the parking lot of our school. You drove down that street, and it went past all the windows of the main rooms of like the homerooms when you were in high school. And so we'd all sit there and watch, and he'd show up late for school driving a dump truck, and he would lean on the boat horn coming down the street so that the whole school had to stop and acknowledge. It wasn't enough that his car took up 4 parking spots in the, once you got over to the student parking lot. So he put everyone on notice. He was definitely that guy.
Bruce in Mississippi, thanks for hanging on, Bruce. What do you got, man?
No problem. Gentlemen, first of all, as a survivor of Katrina and Biloxi, thoughts and prayers to Houston. My first car was a 1971 Lincoln Mercury Capri. I went in and paid $2,120 and tried to talk the salesman out of the $20. But the kicker was it had an 8-track, so I was the go-to. Everybody said, hey, let's pile into Bruce's car. Didn't know you can get 9 people into a Pinto. And the kicker was also the salesman tried to upgrade me to the 6-cylinder motor. I said, how much? He goes, $19. I look at him like he was from Mars. I said, I'm not made of money, Gentlemen, thank you for the entertainment. You take care, guys.
Thanks for the call. I'm not made of money, and it's.
No, listen, it's amazing how many people you can fit in when you're really trying, though. I remember, like, in college when we were sitting around and we'd go to early morning workouts and we'd be leaving our apartment, and it'd be me and 4 other big football players. Like Kyle Rudolph, who plays for the Vikings now. We would pile into his. We just called it the hoopty. Like, this thing was as beat up. We just got in every morning in the freezing cold and prayed to God it started. It was a really old Nissan Altima. And we would just sit there and we would listen to that thing turn over and just pray it started every day. And we fit all 5 of us into that going to morning workouts for probably 2 years in a row before we finally had to put her out to pasture.
Bob in North Carolina. Bob, what do you got, man?
Hey, I cut grass for 2 years to buy a Mustang convertible. I got best car in high school and still own it. I'm a doctor now in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I still love that thing, man. Never forget your first, baby.
That's amazing that you still own it. I love all of that, Bob. Thanks for the call, man.
I was going to say, never forget your first. He never left his first. He married the high school sweetheart. Took her to the prom, and then it's like, you know what? We're going to make a life together, you and me. Doctor, he didn't forget where he came from, man. That might win the day.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that you slip that in. It gives it all the extra credence, too. And it's like, hey, man, I worked all this summer. I cut grass. I saved up. I bought the car. I'm a doctor now, which says, hey, I can buy whatever I want in this car world. And no, he still got that first one. That is sweet. I love everything about that.
That's the kid who shows up to training camp in his mom's minivan's like, you know what? Even after I get that contract, I'm going to hold it down because she got me here.
Oh, I love all of it. It's far better than my K car, but none of it's quite as good as LaMelo's Lamborghini. It's still stunning to me. Coming up next, ESPN analyst Ed Cunningham resigns ahead of the season, citing dangers of football. This is a new precedent we've been talking about. We'll tell you about it next on The Right Time with Bomani Jones, ESPN Radio.
Thanks for listening to The Right Time podcast. Please come back tomorrow for more. And don't forget to listen to The Right Time with Bomani Jones from 4 p.m. to 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Okay, Kevin, for the grand prize of $1 million. What color is the White House?
I know this.
5 seconds.
Oh, switching to Geico could save you a bunch of money on car insurance?
Okay. Judges? That's true, Kevin. They'll allow it. Congratulations. You're a winner.
Woo! Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Welcome to The Right Time podcast. The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. This is The Right Time with Bomani Jones. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. Guys, as we get into this hour, and we've been reminding you throughout the course of the day, don't forget, it's the day of giving. You can get out there and help people affected by Hurricane Harvey by visiting redcross.org/ESPN, redcross.org/ESPN, or if you have your phone right now, you can just pull it out and text the word Harvey in all caps, HARVEY, to 90999. That's all you have to do is text the word Harvey to 90999, and it'll make a $10 donation to the Red Cross. It just adds it to your phone bill. It's super easy. Everybody can be a part of helping as we come together to help the city of Houston in the aftermath of Harvey. It's just Harvey 90999. Super easy to do and be part of helping them recover. Mike Golick Jr., you and I, we've had some heavy conversations. I think that the sports world has gotten heavy over the last year, and plus, longer than the last year. But between the Colin Kaepernick situation, between CTE, there's a lot of heavy conversations that we are sort of forced to have in sports now that I think 5-10 years ago just weren't a part of this climate. And now they are. And head issues is something that we've talked a little about, and everybody's talked a little about on the station throughout. But we have a first at this point because we've seen athletes walk away, and some have walked away because of damage that it causes to the brain. But for the first time, we have an actual one of our colleagues, Ed Cunningham, commentator for ESPN for NFL and for college football, has decided to step away. When you saw that, because he's stepping away because he doesn't want to be a part of this at this point. When you saw it, what did it say to you?
It said that Ed was no longer comfortable with his role in the machine because you hear his comments, and To be clear, when he first resigned, he said he wanted to spend more time. He's got, two young kids.
Yep.
He's got a production company that he works with. He's got other things that he was interested in. And then he said after the fact, I also pointed out that this was something I'd grown increasingly uncomfortable with. And for a guy that's also pointed out and said he doesn't believe the NFL or college football should go away, he wants to be a part of helping to make things safer going forward and be a part of these solutions and believes it can be that way. I can also understand that it's a lot different when you're inside of all of it and you feel like you're not helping. You feel like you're just perpetuating the things that have been going on. And Ed's been very vocal during broadcasts about pointing out instances where he believes, a kid's been put in a compromising position by a coach or medical staff. And so he's been chipping away at it in his own way, but just felt like it wasn't enough to counteract what he felt he was contributing to.
Well, he went on Outside the Lines and talked a little bit about what changed his view. This is what Ed had to say.
The tipping point was, I think, becoming a father. I have 2 young sons, and I was seeing these as I got older, these kids, at 19, 20, 23 years old. I don't want my now 5-year-old to be hit like that. I really think for me, the last few years of becoming a father I don't see them as products anymore. These are kids.
Well, and at some point, I respect that view. You and I have both been cautious in sort of jumping in too hard on the CTE conversation as information continues to come out, right? So, but you have to look at it and say, I'm not a father. I can only imagine that being a father would change the way you want your legacy to be viewed.
Well, we're all a victim, or not a victim's the wrong word, but we're all a product of what we experience, right? Like, my dad's a father, and he looks at all of this and says, not only does he not regret playing football, but based on talks that I've had with him and my brothers had with him, he doesn't regret the fact that he allowed us to play football because it wasn't anything we were forced to do, but he allowed it to happen. And so you can argue that a lot of people were saying you're still putting your kids in that position. But he didn't regret that because in his lifetime, the things that he's seen and been affected by haven't been the same. Like, Ed talks about the fact that he played with Dave Durson, he played with Andre Waters, a guy who my dad also was a teammate with and, understood in that way. But Ed saw these guys up close, and it shaped his worldview, seeing the things that these guys went to. You listen to families of some of the people that have donated their brains to this concussion study, who have seen their loved ones' lives cut short because of what they believe is a connection with football. And you can understand, I'm never going to fault these people for being angry and sad and looking for answers because I don't know what I would do in the same position. All I can say is based on where I sit, I don't exactly see it the same way. But again, these are all of the things we have to kind of acknowledge in this, that based on what Ed's seen, I'd probably be a little more leery of this too. And being a father certainly changes a lot of these things.
Well, and it's interesting because everything in our time getting to know each other, you're very methodical in the way you do a lot of your sort of weighing processes, right? And I think we're similar in that sense. And so we can have a conversation about where this is and what it means and what CTE, what we know, what we don't know. And we've had that conversation. What's interesting about this is for someone to feel like they've made a decision on where they fall on it and they don't want to be part of the legacy around it. That's a very strong statement, and one that while I don't necessarily see everything the same way that Ed does, I respect the heck out of Ed standing up and making the decision to do it the way he's choosing to do it. He talked a little bit also about fans disliking the conversation and the dangers around football. This is what he said on Outside the Lines.
I think people don't want to hear someone on Saturday griping about the safety of the game. And that's true. And that's why I stepped away. I totally see that point of view. Leave it alone. Don't go there. But for me, I couldn't step away. I've been at this game in every fall since 1983, played, coach, broadcast. And I do think the game can get safer. And I would like to be a part of that discussion.
Yeah, I think about this a lot in terms of this industry, the way we talk about things, because I see it from a perspective of someone who's dealing with all of these things every day. And I know you talk about sports as escapism a lot, and this is a corollary of that. This is another version of escapism. I don't want to hear about the fallibility of these people. And I often wonder, because the cries that I hear in a place like Twitter where you can get reaction, but it's curated to an extent. It's curated by who I follow and who, the people I follow retweet and all of these things. And a lot of the reaction I see to the CTE conversation, the concussion conversation, comes from people in the media, people like Ed maybe that weren't former players, but that are at least around these guys and see them enough to know them as human beings. Fans, I wonder often how much they really care, because in this concussion conversation, I've always said, as much as people, when you have an interest in football, tend to shy away from your opinion because they say you have a vested interest, you profit and benefit from the game continuing to succeed, I say, no. I benefit from the most crystal clear information possible because my dad, friends, me, my brother are the ones whose lives and brains are at stake. Like I think I would care more than anyone. But I wonder if fans on the outside who watch and listen to all this say, no, we just want to continue to believe that these guys are going to go out there and perform and be happy and do all these things and really actually care about the safety of people they don't know.
I will come in and say it's a limited sample size, I know, but we did when I was sitting in for Jalen and Jacoby about a month ago. I gave everybody the opportunity to just call in, and we took as many calls as we could take that day. And the whole premise was you don't even have to tell us who you are, where you're from. Just tell me this. Do you care about CTE or the brains of football players at all? And we took calls throughout the entire course of the show. We took one call that cared. And every other call that we took was essentially saying, nope, just watching football. And I did it that way because I'm not here to judge anybody for it, because as you know, and you just alluded to, I talk all the time about escapism. I think that we live in a world where when you go to a concert, you're not looking at Dave Matthews Band and wondering what the health insurance situation is for those guys. Like, we don't think about the real life application of what some of these things mean for the people you get your entertainment for. So I am a big believer that at some point fans just want their entertainment and their sports to be fun and don't want to think. And I've always tried to provide that platform. That being said, again, for Ed to come in and say, hey, I'm not comfortable. I mean, I think he kind of acknowledged in that audio, look, I think that fans may not want to hear about it, and that's fine. I'm going to respect that by not being on the broadcast, because that way I don't have to be stuck in the middle of between what I believe people should hear and what I believe people want to hear.
And I get what you're saying about people wanting their entertainment, free of a lot of the trappings of normal life. But man, that seems like a position that's awfully convenient for the people that are lucky enough to be able to have that. Like, Ed's worried because he knows. People in the media, people like me around sports, are worried about these things enough to care about them because we know and experience them. Like, it's a lot easier to put off someone else's problems and not worry about a group of people when you don't actually know them. And I think just saying that because I don't know you, I can't extend any of the empathy that just treats you like a human being, that's sad, man. That's a weird place to be at for all of us.
But let's defend the fan, though. How many fans have grown up in a next man up culture where you're told constantly, no matter what happens, it's next man up? And we live in a world where, to use a very drastic example, we've seen players paralyzed on the field, and it shuts down the mindset of the fan for about a week before everybody sort of resets. That's been the fan mentality for a very long time. I don't think that that's a new thing. We've seen the dangers of physicality on a football field for generations, and it's not something that shuts people down from watching the sport.
I'm not asking it to shut it down, but I'm saying when it comes up to poo-poo it away and say, well, I don't want to hear about the realities of this. I just want you to keep giving me the thing I need to feel good on Sunday. Like, no. You should have to deal with the crystal clear picture of this. Know what you're watching. And listen, I know what I'm watching, and I still watch it, but I'm cognizant of it. I understand the things that are happening. If you want to just hide your head in the sand on it, I don't know if that's any way to go through life.
Maybe. I mean, I'll come back again. I'll come back to the defense of the people that called in that I talked to, and it's not necessarily burying your head in the sand. It's acknowledging it and then saying, yeah, but I don't really care. And that's harsh to say.
Is that better?
I don't know.
Doesn't sound like it, man. You may not want to judge. I'll judge.
Well, you can catch Ed tomorrow with Mike and Mike at 9 a.m. He'll be on there. When we come back, we'll get to the college football is underway. Jake Trotter going to join us tonight, one of our favorite college football writers. We'll get his thoughts on the Big 12 and the Oklahoma State matchup. We'll do that next. I'm Bomani Jones. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Right Time with Bomani Jones. Also, song of the day. Golick, I'm giving you a little Drifters. You like this? Feel good about this one? This is, I've gotten a little ridicule after Mac the Knife, so I went to the Drifters this time. Another one of my karaoke favorites, though.
It's playing well in the room right now. I see Shannon swaying a little bit. You've won the crowd back today. I'm proud of you.
Does it say something about how old I am that I continue to pick these random songs and then try and invite you to karaoke with me? I don't know. I mean,
listen, karaoke is for everybody. All right, like.
Yes,
Yes,
karaoke is, but me karaokeing the Drifters is a little, like, I'll admit that when I get up and do Mac the Knife karaoke, people look at me a little funny.
Yeah, listen, like, I'm one of those that, again, when it comes to karaoke, you got to win the crowd. So I don't know if that exactly gets it done, but I won't stop you from trying to live your best life.
Well, I appreciate that. All guests appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, and we want to bring on one of our favorites to help us sort of get all of this worked out as college football season gets underway. Jake Trotter joins us. Jake, in your mind, what's the state of the Big 12 this year?
Cautious optimism, guys. The Big 12's coming off a pretty good bowl season. They've got 5 teams in the top 25, but they're getting ready to face the toughest non-conference schedule in the history of the conference. So the Big 12 could be completely decimated by the time we get to October, or there could be a couple teams looking like potential playoff contenders. I think this is one of the biggest months, really, in the history of the conference.
And, I mean, it starts tonight. So Oklahoma State, a team that I feel like, especially nationally in the last couple of weeks, has started to get more play. You bring back Mason Rudolph, who's on one of the short lists for the Heisman odds going into the season. How much can we really expect from Oklahoma State as far as knocking on that Sooners door? Because it seems like it's the Sooners and everyone else right now.
And I picked Oklahoma to win the Big 12 for that reason. I mean, if you put the two teams in a vacuum, you could make a very good case for Oklahoma State to win the Big 12. I've been at these Bedlam games where Oklahoma State has had a chance to win the Big 12 in Bedlam 3 of the last 4 years. And not only have they lost, I mean, they've gotten beaten down in a couple of these games. So there are two factors kind of at play, though, in Bedlam. You know, one, the game got moved up to November 4th instead of the end of the year. Maybe that takes a little pressure off the Cowboys. And there's this guy now by the name of Bob Stoops who's no longer going to be coaching in it, and maybe that changes the dynamic as well. There's a lot to like about Oklahoma State, and if you've got one of the top 6 or 7 quarterbacks in the country, you're going to have a chance in pretty much every game.
With that being said, you mentioned that the coaching change. How much different does the Big 12 look this year when we look at Texas, Oklahoma, not knowing what those coaches are going to look like in that environment?
Yeah, you have to go all the way back to 1947, the last time that Oklahoma and Texas have had first-year head coaches in the same season. And there's a lot of pressure on them, both at the individual programs. Tom Herman to finally turn Texas around after arguably the worst 7-year stretch in the history of that program. And then Lincoln Riley to kind of maintain and maybe even build off what Bob Stoops has been able to do with his consistency in recent years. If you look at the Big 12, Oklahoma State being good is great. Kansas State being good is great. But you really need your flagships to perform. And, you know, the Red River rivalry has not been a matchup of top 10 teams since 2008. Those two have got to be better in order for the Big 12 to be taken seriously by people outside the conference, and more importantly, people in that college football playoff selection committee room.
What does year one look like success for Matt Rule in this Baylor program, knowing all the things that they've gone through, knowing what's associated with them right now in the greater landscape of college sports?
You know, honestly, I mean, you almost judge him by what he does off the field more so than by what he does on it. You know, if they can minimize the headlines, if they can, you know, make sure their kids are doing the right things, and even to some extent their staff is doing the right things, that in of itself is a win for Baylor right now. On the field, I think they're going to have some problems. They don't have the firepower at receiver that they have had in the past. They're going to start a new Solomon, a grad transfer from Arizona at quarterback, which kind of shows what they had coming back at that position. They're not nearly as good on the offensive line as they've been, and they're, you know, they got a couple nice defensive players, but overall, you know, not a lot there as well. So, I mean, I think if they get to a bowl game, I would call that a pretty good season for Matt Rule in his first year.
So, Jake, when you think about the national title conversation, can you make an argument in your mind that one of these teams can somehow step up and win that?
The Big 12?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's going to take the Big 12 to perform in the non-conference in order for the committee to take the league seriously. Because, you know, last year, you know, Big 12 didn't have collectively a top 25 win. And so even though Oklahoma became the first team in 7 years to run the table in the conference, they weren't even in the discussion. I think Oklahoma has a chance at Columbus. I don't give them a good one, but I think they have a chance. You know, and if somebody can win that kind of game for the Big 12, you know, I don't think Texas is going to beat USC, but who knows? if the Big 12 can get one of those wins to make people, go, whoa, look at the Big 12, I think that's really going to help the conference. Otherwise, I think it's going to be tough. I'm not picking the Big 12 to put a team in the playoff. I'm going with the four other conferences, USC, Florida State, Ohio State, and Alabama, who is my national champ as well.
For the Heisman Trophy conversation, maybe these things go hand in hand just because how important team success is to the award. But what does Baker Mayfield's odds look like going into this season, knowing the numbers he's put up, but also a lot of the harsh off-the-field criticism that he's drawn for good reason?
Yeah, I don't know that the off-the-field stuff is going to be a factor. I mean, I think that's kind of in the past to some degree. He has a chance to become the second player alongside Herschel Walker since the 40s to finish in the top four of the Heisman voting 3 times. I wonder if there's a little bit of Baker fatigue in Heisman voters. They've been voting for him the last 2 years. Are they going to vote him up there again, especially if they don't beat Ohio State? But, hey, I mean, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He continues to defy odds, and I wouldn't write him off. I mean, if they go up there in week 2 and win in Columbus, I think he's probably the front runner at that point.
It's fantastic stuff, guys. You can follow him on Twitter at Jake_Trotter. Jake, we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on with us, man.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
Great stuff from Jake. ESPN Radio presented by Progressive Insurance, comparing rates to help you save. Now that's Progressive. Click or call today and find out how much you can save. Golick, when you look at it, can the Big 12 win a national championship?
Listen, I think these top-end teams are absolutely capable, but we've heard it. There's kind of a fall-off after the top 3 teams in college football in general right now, so you definitely need some help. But on their best day, do I believe teams with veteran quarterbacks coming out of one of the premier conferences in college football can make some sort of charge toward the title? Absolutely. It's not far-fetched. Now, Oklahoma lost a lot of weapons. They lost something like 75% of their rush yards and 50% of their receiving yards to the NFL draft this last year, but there's always going to be talent there. We'll just see what Lincoln Riley's got in store for it.
Well, we'll get the thoughts on the rest of the college football landscape next up. Phil Steele going to join us, one of our favorite insiders here. He'll join us next up. It's the right time with Bomani Jones. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. Handcrafted. It's all the rage. From flour press soap to homemade hot sauce to artisanal pickles. Delicious, whatever those are. Well, Firestone Complete Auto Care is glad it's catching on because they've been handcrafting repairs since 1926. And their 4,000 ASE certified technicians, they work hard every day to help keep cars running like new. Before people were making organic greeting cards and rock jewelry in their basements, Firestone Complete Auto Care has been hard at work in the garage, tightening, torquing, and wrenching. And they back that work with their fixed right promise, guaranteeing your car is fixed right, your repair is priced right, and the work is completed right on time, keeping your car running newer longer. When the road gets rough, you need a set of tires that can get tough. Right now at Firestone Complete Auto Care, get $70 by mail on a Bridgestone Visa prepaid card when you buy a set of 4 eligible Bridgestone tires. Whatever you drive a Firestone. Offer valid August 10th through October 8th in stores only. Claim form required. It excludes blizzard. Restrictions apply. See claim form for eligible tires and details. Prepaid card issued by the Bancorp Bank. Member FDIC.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Hi, Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. This is The Right Time with Bomani Jones. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. It's the beginning of college football season, and I know how excited Mike Golick Jr. is about that. And as a result, I figured I'd do the only thing you can do for another man when they're excited about college football season. Got him some flowers. Nothing makes the summer, birthday, anniversary, or the beginning of football season more magical than 1-800-Flowers.com. Right now, when you order a dozen multicolored roses for only $29.99, you get another dozen absolutely free. Just go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. And, Mike, you're welcome in advance of that. So,
yeah, thank you for drenching those flowers in cheese.
I'm here for you, my friend. So here for us to help us break down everything that we need to know about the upcoming college football season, one of the smartest in the business, one of our favorite to talk to, ESPN college football insider Phil Steele joins us. And Phil, I'm curious, you put together an amazing book every year. When you do what you do, are you allowed to have a favorite college football team?
You know, you're not allowed, but I do have a favorite team every year.
Who's that? Oh, every year.
Yeah.
Okay. I was waiting for the fine print because for to peel back the curtain a little bit. We're sitting around here just kind of chatting about the book because, again, Phil Steele's college football preview every year is like the Bible for people in our industry trying to get ready for college football season. I was showing, proudly displaying mine to Phil in the studio here because it's all marked up and I've been going through my notes and doing the prep for this season. And we just got to talking about favorite teams. Mine's pretty obvious. I sort of wear that one. And he asked you, Fitzy, if you had a favorite team, and you said no. And he hinted that he did, and I immediately took the bait. So you've got a favorite team every year.
Yeah, my favorite team is a team that I pick higher than everybody else. I'll actively root for that team. Like Washington, for example, last year, they were my number one surprise team coming off a 7-6 season. Yeah, I was happy when they made the playoffs. I bought some Washington Husky gear. I was a very big Washington fan.
I see you with the purple on in here today. If you've seen him around SportsCenter at all today, he's been rocking that purple, so now we know there's a method to the color choice.
It's like confessional with Phil Steele. I love this. Phil, let me ask you this, though. What is because we all use your book like the Bible, as Golick just said. What is your method? How do you what's your process?
Well, it's a 6-month process. It actually starts the Sunday after Thanksgiving. And what I do is I go through and read every story that was written about the team for the year. It takes about 4 to 6 hours on each team. Then I get my original power ratings based on a team. I rate each position, quarterback, running back, receiver, etc. And then you do that about 2-3 teams a day, and you do that for a couple of months, and you get to 130. Then you get to the second right-through process. Now the spring guides are starting to come out, and the freshmen have signed. And you adjust what you wrote the first time, and you get all that information in. Once again, you catch up on all the reading, add all the freshmen, adjust your power ratings. Then comes the third one, the post-spring. After spring is over, I watch every spring game that's on TV, read every spring game, and then come up with my post-spring. And the fourth part would be talk to the coaches. At that point, I'm ready to talk to the coaches, run through every single player on the team with them, try to get to as many coaches as I can. But it's a 6-month process. I've got about 15 people that work for me. They're making sure every single stat on those right-handed pages is 100% accurate. And it's just a grueling process. It starts the Sunday after Thanksgiving. June 1st, we send that last page to the press. A lot of relief that day. I'm definitely cracking open a couple of cold ones at that day.
I was going to say, because this for me is a lot like what you hear preparation-wise for like Mel Kiper and Todd McShay as they get ready for the draft. And then I know Mel always takes a big vacation right after that. Like, do you have a vacation planned as soon as you hit that day? Or what does Phil Steele do to wind down after all this is done?
I do try to get a vacation in at some time. At least take 2 or 3 days off of work, because I work 7 days a week. So there's never a day off during magazine season. And taking 2 or 3 days off, people are like, really? You're not going to be on work tomorrow? I'm like, no, I'm not going to be on work tomorrow. So that's the way it's going to be.
The rest of us take a couple of weeks in the summertime, and Phil takes 2 or 3 days off and already feels that pull to come back. Wow.
So, Phil, with that being said, I mean, we're all sort of kids in a candy store today with the beginning of college football really kicking off tonight with the Ohio State game. For you, do you still get the thrill when the season starts?
It's a lot more fun because I've been writing about it. I've been working on the 2017 season since the November last year. So I'm just happy that these teams are actually playing on the field, and hopefully they'll be exactly what I thought they would be this year. Naturally, you're never going to be 100% accurate in a magazine, but yes, it's always a lot more fun when the games are being played. And now I've got some data to crunch. You can watch a couple games, and you can adjust your power ratings and, see how good teams are. And there's a lot of fun when football's actually played.
So that there's a lot of adjustment that goes on once you hit the body of the year for you as well then.
Oh, I have 9 sets of power ratings, update them every single week. And I watch every game. And if you see a player's out, you can adjust the power ratings. If you see a player's better than expected, you can adjust the power ratings. If you see a unit or player is weaker than expected, adjust the power ratings. All season long, I'm adjusting them because I want them to be the best each week.
So with that being said, when we get through this weekend and all the big marquee matchups we have, what kind of adjustments do you think you'll be making?
It's interesting you point that out. On ESPN Insider, I'm putting my top 25 Vegas power ratings each week. You'll see the changes each week, and I'm sure there'll be some drastic ones. As an example, last week, Stanford, I probably had them about 16 coming in. I definitely bumped them up to 12. When I talked to David Shaw in the offseason, he told me about his tight ends. He said, hey, we're 6 deep at tight end. Yeah, I watched the Rice game. I know it was Rice, but Rice is not that horrible of a team. They're going to be middle of the road CUSA. His tight ends are awesome. His linebackers, just what I thought they were. I have my number 2 rated unit in the country. The defensive line, solid. Every single unit. And then the thing I like most, Keller Christ is healthy. I was worried about that in the spring. He missed all of spring. To see him healthy, that was the missing ingredient, really is. And Stanford gets Washington at home. in the third week of November. So that could be the game that determines that Pac-12 North.
Talking to Phil Steele here in studio, and now it seems, because you were showing me before the notes from Penn State and talking to Coach there, and just how open and honest coaches are with you about their players. You mentioned talking to David Shaw. I have to imagine at this point coaches are very giving of that information because they understand that ultimately that helps paint the best picture of them possible. How was this when you first got started doing this, trying to beat down these doors and get to talk to coaches in this way?
Yeah, I didn't even try the first 5 years of the magazine because, we're just so new and so out there. But then, I attended like a MAC coaches conference, for example, MAC Media Days. Went there, I think it was probably about 15 years ago, and found the coaches very open because they knew the magazine, they read the magazine, they said they used it to prep for their opponents. And what I do for the coaches is I can send them their opponents' pages without the coaches' comments, just the stuff that I garnered throughout the spring. If you say it to the media, okay, your comment's on the page. You say it to Phil, your comment's not anywhere. So I send them the comments prior to talking to Phil of their opponents, and that helps them prep for the season. I'll give you a story. I was talking to Matt Wells, the coach of Utah State, and he says, Phil, I knew I had to talk to you. I go, why is that, Coach? He goes, because I was sitting in my office one day as a defensive coordinator, and Gary Anderson walks in and throws these on my desk, and he says, these are gold. And they were your pages of the offenses that we were going to face that year. So he goes, I knew right then I had to talk to you, and I've talked to Coach Wells each year at Utah State.
Is there a coach, we're talking to Phil Steele, ESPN College Football Insider, is there a coach that you want to sell out here that has blown you up when you put it out and didn't like something you said?
Never.
See, smart man.
I tried.
No, here's what the coaches are. They don't necessarily want you to pick their team number one. In fact, I was talking to Texas State's coach last year, and I told him after the interview, I go, Coach, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to pick you last. It was his first year there. I'm going to have expectations low for your team, and as it was, they only won one game last year, so they were pretty low. But I said, that's a favor to get picked last because look at Tennessee. Tennessee had those high expectations last year, and now Butch Jones is legitimately on the hot seat, not because of Tennessee's season, but because they didn't meet expectations. So not all coaches want big expectations coming into the year.
Listen, if there's one thing I've learned early on, even in this business, is it's all about managing expectations. And so if you ever decide to power rank the people in Bristol, now you're going to be out here every Thursday during the fall. We're going to see you all over the place. So if you ever decide to power rank all of us, keep me nice and low, Phil. I appreciate it.
There you go.
Guys, you can follow him on Twitter at Phil Steele 042 and go out and get the Phil Steele college football preview. Mike Golick Jr. is just letting you in behind the curtain. We all use it. We all love it. Phil, thanks for the great work, man. We appreciate you coming on.
A lot of fun. We should do this more often.
Absolutely.
It's great stuff from Phil. We are moments away from college football kickoff. We'll break it all down, plus a fantastic car story you won't want to miss. All that coming up on The Right Time with Bomani Jones. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. You're listening to The Right Time with Bomani Jones. ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. Mike, don't need nothing but a good time because college football is almost here. All of our guests have appeared by the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, by the way. So, Mike, on a level of 1 to 10, your level of excitement for tonight is?
Tonight, it's conflicted excitement tonight because because Ohio State in general as a team and as a brand and as a school identity is not something I tend to consider myself a fan of, but as the unbiased college football fan that I am, it's like a 15, man. College football is back. Football in general. Like, we don't have to worry anymore. As people that thrive in the content industry, we've got football as content every weekend from now until the end of the Super Bowl. Look what God did, man. It's amazing.
I sit here looking at Ohio State, and I continue to scratch my head for this one because there are several key brand matchups that we'll talk about. I know some more tomorrow when we're hanging out. There are several key, Michigan, Florida, and Alabama, Florida State, and Tennessee, Georgia Tech, and you can go up and down the list of matchups that feel like they're brand matchups. But with this one particularly, Ohio State, Indiana, I just can't see a lot that Ohio State wins other than if they come out and just smoke them. If anything short of smoking them, and people are going to be, the sky is falling. This is the one time that it's a little, we're forced to overreact because there's no preseason. In the NFL, we've been able to overreact to meaningless football that doesn't count, and we can all talk about how the ship has been righted in 10 days when the regular season, or in a week, I guess, from tonight when the regular season starts. College football, we don't have that advantage, so we're just sort of forced to overreact to whatever we see tonight.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Early season stuff's easy to excuse away, man. As someone that's, gone through that before, it opened up the season with a less than stellar performance against the San Diego States of the world or something like that. Yeah, you want to come out and set a strong tone and thump Nevada or beat Navy in Ireland by like 40 points, humble brag, like we did. But you can do those things, but even if you don't, you always have that spin of, well, listen, if you're Ohio State, it's this first time opening the season against a Big Ten opponent since 1976. Like, they're going out of their way to play a tougher opponent earlier than you normally have to, and with a team that was as young as it was last year that's still going to carry some of that youth this year, I think you can say we're always shooting to just be a better team later in the season than we are now.
And it's not that that's not true, but can we not mark the tape and take a look at tomorrow, or in our example last year when we did College Football Daily together? You want to tell me that we didn't the first couple of weeks overreact to how each team looked? I mean, there was a point in time where the TV shows were having a conversation early on in the season on whether USC would fire their head coach. And by the end of the year, it was, well, my gosh, they're a playoff caliber football team. We overreact as a nature. That's sort of what everybody does in general with college football. So I'm just saying that the overreaction parade is going to be marching in full effect if Ohio State comes out. If J.T. Barrett looks like trash, if he's inaccurate with his passing, or if Ohio State comes out and barely wins, yes, you're right. In the long term, it'll have some perspective. In the short term, you can't tell me people won't overreact tomorrow.
Who am I kidding? We didn't even have to get to games, and my dad was already ripping Harbaugh, saying that people would probably put him on the hot seat there in Michigan. All he's done is win 10 games in his first 2 seasons at Michigan. It's what we do in the world of sports in general. But you're right, Ohio State won't be immune to that. I'm sure there'll be some wackadoo somewhere that calls for Urban Meyer's job if this game is closer than it needs to be.
Oh, man.
There will be one guy. That's the thing in this world, the varied amount of opinions, the amount of places to voice them that we have. Someone will voice that opinion. Some guy's going to be out there and do it.
Oh, my God.
Get the takes warmed up early. It's college football season.
I both love and hate all of that for it. I will say college football, again, taking full advantage of this last weekend before the NFL kicks into full swing for the very reason we just talked about. I mean, we do get there's a compelling reason to watch Ohio State, Indiana tonight to me. I think it is interesting to have a conference matchup right out of the gate and a team that is a national championship contender. And then over the course of the weekend, we have how many recognizable teams playing in games that we can argue about what their significance will mean long-term for the season, but you can't argue about what their significance means right now. It's getting everybody's attention. That's what college football is doing very well.
No more reading spring game tea leaves. No more reading the scouting reports. Phil Steele, let's start upgrading these algorithms, baby. It's game time.
That's amazing. Did you read a lot of spring leaf tea leaves? I don't know.
Love tea leaves.
Oh, that's great. Jalen and Jacoby coming up next. They're going to be reading all sorts of tea leaves. I'm sure they'll keep getting you caught up on this matchup. It's Bomani Jones. Right time. He's Mike Golick Jr. I'm Jason Fitz.
Thanks for listening to the Right Time Podcast. Please come back tomorrow for more. And don't forget to listen to The Right Time with Bomani Jones from 4 p.m. to 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.